And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is here Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff, slowly broadcasting from the United States and making sure everything works just fine. The reason for the delay this time was the slow internet that American ISPs provide. Even Bernie Sanders noticed that Romania has better internet. Yeah. So, how's the weather?
It's actually really good this week. It's been like today and yesterday wasn't that good, but for most of the week it's been basically sunshine and like up to 20 degrees here, so
Yeah,
that's really good.
we actually had genuine summer for the last 3 days. Today it was a little bit more cloudy, but the previous 3 days of the week we had genuine summer, like 29, 30, 31 degrees in Celsius. The annoying part was that after 7 p.m. it got really cold, like back to 14 or things of that nature. So it's a bit confusing. All right. Uh, I guess I could go straight with the news. The first one is the kind of article that quite literally everyone has been sending it to me, either this version or the sloppy translation published by the Daily Mail, sloppy and incomplete. Yes, I've seen it. I think I've got like 30 people at the very least on the email, on Twitter, on IRC, on YouTube, everyone. Man, you have to make a video about this. No, I won't because I don't have the time to make a video about it. But at the very least, I can translate it so everyone gets the context without the cuttings made either by the far left venues or the far right venues. So, I'll read it in its entirety. Coming from NRK, jeg ble våldet av en man. I was raped by a man. And goes like this. I'm a heterosexual man who was raped by a Somali asylum seeker. My life fell into gravel, but now I feel guilt of him being sent out of the country. How is it to be a man and raped? How is it to be a young SVer, feminist and anti-racist, and raped by a Somali man? I feel like such a cartoon robot that is overloaded, the head explodes. I did not know how to respond, so therefore I pretended to be okay. I turned off and became numb and felt nothing for nearly 5 years. Uh, this was all helped by cannabis and drunkenness. For the record, Ed Svier is a member of the Socialistisk Venstrepartiet, which is the leftist socialist party in Norway, formerly the Communist Party, of course. Back to the article. A few years after the rape happened, I was in a conversation group with others who have also experienced rape at a research center for rape victims. It was quite shocking for me to hear their stories because mine becomes a success story in comparison. Many had lost friends when they told about it. Others would never tell either friends or family. Several of those who filed charges experienced not being believed by the police and that the investigation had been dropped. Their experiences correspond probably better with the media than my story. I was riding in an ambulance right to the rape reception center at the emergency room in Oslo, and there were all kinds of all kinds of samples were taken by caring nurses. I also got to talk to a psychologist who was on duty until I was fetched by my father. The day after, I heard that the police had searched with dogs and helicopters. My room was ransacked by crime scene investigators, and I had fingerprint ink on the desk for months afterwards. They managed to secure both DNA and fingerprints. Police interrogation, I saw it as absolutely as it should have been. I told the policeman my story and I was listened to. He was aware that this was an important issue for them. About half a year after that, the same policeman called and told me that they had received guarantees that the fingerprints of a person who was arrested for having a knife in a public place, matches the one of my assailant. The trial went well. The perpetrator claimed that what had happened had been voluntary, but all the circumstances uh, left very little doubt about the question of guilt. He was sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison. Sometime before the completion of the sentence, I received a call when I was at work. It was one of the prison officers who told me he would be sent straight to Trandum and then out of the country. I was a bit taken by surprise by how much it was to get this message, but I remained calm enough to tell the manager that I had to go. The tears came the moment I sat in the car. I felt a relief and joy that he was going away forever. I felt that the Norwegian government took the responsibility to exercise the ultimate revenge like an angry father confronts his child's abuser. But I also got a strong sense of guilt and responsibility. It was I who was the reason why he should not be left in Norway anymore, but rather be sent for a very uncertain future back in Somalia. He had already served his sentence in prison. Should he now be punished again, and this time much harder? After the rape, I felt I was pushed out of a way of life that I was well inside. I've lost so much time, and it was the worst consequence. New conditions and new friends I can always get. The bond that was weakened by years in a haze of marijuana smoke can be strengthened again. But the years in which self-loathing was the only self-esteem I had, those years disappeared in depression and cannabis use. Those are the years that I cannot get back. It is scary and taboo to talk about young men's emotional life. I feel forgotten and ignored, but I dare not talk about it. I'm afraid of attacks from all sides. I'm afraid that no girl would want me and that other men would laugh at me. Afraid that I'll be perceived as anti-feminist when I say that young men who are struggling should get more attention. But what the hell? We're struggling. We must be seen. Men and boys learned that it is okay to talk about their feelings, but then boys and men are ignored. For me, it resulted in years of depression, abuse, loneliness, and isolation. When I saw that NRK searched for participants for a documentary about young people with mental disorders, there were many reasons why I signed on. I signed up, sorry. Most were completely personal and selfish. I would tell my parents about substance abuse problems, and this as a way to force it forward. By standing up publicly, I gave myself no choice. But I would also get an external motivation to be able to achieve my goal. I would make them more real and binding. I was aiming to stop the use of marijuana and begin the studies again and be active socially. I also had another reason to join that program. I wanted to break with the generalized perceptions that rape victims are always women and that one is ruined for life after rape. I am a heterosexual man, and I was raped by another, presumably heterosexual man. To understand how this can happen requires that one must think a little past the first prejudiced tank. I've learned that the culture in which the rapist comes from is so totally different from ours, and here comes the cucking. In his culture, sexual abuse trades are mostly about power and less about desire. It is not regarded as a homosexual act being for the one exerting power and doing the raping. I do not feel anger towards my abuser, and it is incomprehensible to many. But I have to some extent chosen to accept that he is responsible for his actions. This was difficult, for I see him most as a product of an unjust world, a product of an upbringing marked by war and deprivation. I stand rock solid in my opinion that people like him need our help. I want us to continue to help refugees with such a background. I have been a victim of an injustice and a dark part of the world that we are largely shielded from here at home. But I have yet reconciled myself that it happened to me here in Norway. For I am a human being first and not a Norwegian. No, I'm part of the world, and the world is unfortunately unfair. Now what?
Well, he started really good, until you made that comment about the now starts the cucking, whatever you said. Until that point, I was nodding along, but yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of article that is good up to a point and then goes full Macintosh. Actually, thinking about this article, that's how I decided the title of the show, When Ideology Suppresses Reality. So, how do you get from I was raped by a Somali asylum seeker to we're all citizens of the world and Somalia and Norway is pretty much the same thing and everything is very unfair? And how do you get from that? What's the thought process?
I mean, the thing is, he it seems to me that he does not view everyone as being the same, but rather that he views people from Somalia as not really having moral agency. That, you know, it's not
Yes.
that
Cool.
he raped him because he's a bad person, but just because he's brought up in this culture where whatever something the excuse is. When if he had been raped by a fellow Norwegian, he would not be making these excuses.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because again, ideology seems to trump reality. Uh, and this kind of thing, oh, we must continue helping individuals with such a background. Uh, yeah, provided that they don't commit violent crimes, I guess. I mean, even from a leftist perspective, just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean
And go ahead, please.
there's a lot of legitimate arguments to be made for and against this whole asylum policy, but people who commit very serious crimes like rape, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that they should not be allowed to stay in the country.
Well, it is a no-brainer for us. It's not really a no-brainer for the Socialistisk Venstrepartiet, which is a very special kind of stupid in Norway. I mean, in some moments they make the Feministisk Initiative in Sweden look like far right in comparison. And in other moments they make Lenin look like a moderate conservative in comparison. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to Socialistisk Venstreparti is very, very hard to find the reason in there. Another aspect that he mentions, he doesn't want to see to be called an anti-feminist when he mentions young men's emotional problems or something like that. Yeah, there you go. I'll be perceived as anti-feminist when I say that young men who are struggling should get more attention. I think he's a little bit late to the party, especially in Norway. I mean, in Norway, feminism has been contested and challenged in public far more ruthlessly and mercilessly than in Sweden. And it's no longer a taboo, actually, to speak about such issues. And so he's a little bit late to the party, or maybe he meant his own political party, which in that case I can agree.
I mean, it is a taboo among the far left, I would assume. Maybe not among the general population, but among the far left, it's definitely very much taboo. And he's having sort of a crisis of faith, I guess, where what has happened to him is very much in contrast to what his deep-held ideological beliefs are.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know how the expression is in English, but trying to force a square into a round hole, something like that. There is an
Square
expression.
peg into a round hole.
Yeah, there you go. That's the expression that I was looking for. That's what he seems to be trying here. I mean, most even the more mainstream left-wing political party in Norway has a very sensible position on this kind of thing. I mean, yeah, sure, they're for bigger entitlements for quote-unquote refugees, but nevertheless, they also agree that there has to be some limits and whatnot. I mean, it's a totally different planet than Sweden, which is everyone is welcome. Well, they're gonna get 80% of our country. Who cares? Everyone is welcome because there is room for everyone. Oh wait, we don't have any houses left. Doesn't matter. Everyone is welcome. That's Sweden. In Norway, it's not like that. In Norway, it's a little bit more moderate, a little bit more like, wait a second, no, we need to have some sanity in here. So even those are willing to recognize, and even those are kept on saying, look, there's going to be a steep increase in the violent crime, and yes, we will crack down and apply deportations and whatnot. And the Venstrepartiet was always against everything of this nature. It was like any attempt of common sense was routinely brushed off as racist and fascist and totalitarian and whatnot. And then the exact things that everyone warned about happens to him. That I can understand that can be quite not just shocking, but shattering, maybe.
Yeah, and it makes him into a literal rape apologist.
Quite literally, yes, because that's what I was trying to eventually end up calling him a rape apologist. I mean, with all the sympathy and of course the fact that it took 5 years of his life and the depression and whatnot, that's terrible, of course. But nonetheless, this guy is an actual rape apologist.
Yeah, and it's not in this sort of sense that this term is thrown around that and if you don't believe every rape accusation, you're a rape apologist, or if you believe that consent is sometimes murky, then you're a rape apologist. Things like that, where this word is used in a very inflationary way. But no, he's actually apologizing for rape, saying that it's not really his fault because it's part of his culture and uh, should not be deported and so on.
Yeah, that's quite literally the definition of a rape apologism. What I don't understand is if you're so guilt-ridden and if you're so rock solid in your communist beliefs, essentially, then why file for an accusation to begin with?
Yeah, I don't know about that. There have, I believe, been cases where I think it was a woman who was raped by refugee was sort of a helper
Italy, yeah.
in Italy, where she was pressured by the other helpers not to press for charges because it would make refugees look bad.
Hmm.
Um, so
It turned out to be true, the story, by the way.
mhm.
We were unsure about it at that time because there were so many stories, and we knew that at least a portion of them were mythology. But that one actually turned out to be true, and that's where does this stop? Because with this migration crisis, we've got a whole new wave of ideologues on the block. I mean, it's not just feminist ideologues, but it's these kinds of ideologues with this unshakable belief that uh, anything that might put their narrative into question should be absolutely suppressed. And then we get this even newer brand of ideologues who have actually been victims um, of violence by migrants, yet they, as a response to that, they cope with more guilt trips. Because a similar story to that circulated in the German media. I don't know if that one was true or not, but it is not the first time I read this kind of article, nonetheless.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
I
this
don't
guy actually exists. I mean, there's no doubt that this story is
yeah.
legit. This guy actually exists. The one that I read from the German media, I wasn't sure. It was also a leftist from Die Linke, a woman that was at that time, but I'm not sure that that one actually. I mean, the woman exists, but there was no way to corroborate the article with her actual story. So I suspended judgment and refrained from commenting about it in a public manner. But it seems that these kinds of people actually do exist, and what I'm aiming here is some clues over how their thought process works. How far would they be willing to go? Because if they're willing to go far enough, they're quite dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, this young man at least did report the rape, and it's not like as what he wrote here is that he was glad that he would that this guy was that the perpetrator was convicted, and he was glad that he was expelled from the country, even though he sort of felt guilty about that feeling, but he still has that feeling, so it's not.
So you're saying this one is not really that extreme.
Yeah, it's not actually that extreme. Like given that he's a far leftist and has these beliefs, he's sort of coping with the situation in a reasonably sane way. Like he's not going to just suddenly overturn all his deeply held beliefs because of one experience, which is I think quite reasonable. Because one experience is not a lot of data. It's just one story that shouldn't fundamentally change your worldview. Now, I don't agree with him holding that worldview in the first place, but given that he holds that worldview, changing it because of one personal experience would actually be a sign of irrationality. So I guess in this way, I have to commend him.
Yeah, the reasoning makes sense. What you just said makes entire sense. What he doesn't go into, and that's the part I would have been interesting to learn. He mentions that he has been at a rape victims resource center or something like that, and his story looks like a success one in comparison to the ones he's heard there. Uh, okay, I suppose that's true. I don't know. What I am interested is how many others that have been victimized in a similar manner has he been able to meet in some way, shape, or form? I mean, given that he believes in these resource center things and he admits that he's been through several of them, I I don't know, has he never met anyone else in a similar situation? Because Norway is not a big country, and if you get victimized and you meet 12, 20 or 30 other people in a similar situation, that's already data by Norway standards. Because Norway is a small country, and most of the populace lives around the Oslo area somehow. So if you get 20 people in the Oslo area in the same situation as you, it's already a problem.
Yeah, but I mean, presumably most of these people who have been raped have not been raped by refugees, but
Yeah, that's the presumption, but I don't know if it's true. That's what I would have been interested to find out, and
yeah, yeah.
I've still been able to find that kind of data, which is odd because the Norwegian government isn't known for censorship. But for now, there is no data on that regard. Neither that it is not happening, nor that it is happening, but at a lower date. Sorry, rate. They just haven't published.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so that's essentially the article that's now going viral via the Daily Mail with their sloppy translation. I presume that there will be quite a lot of talk about it if throughout the weekend everyone will read or listen to this recording, and there will be quite a lot of discussion. Until then, let's get to the next one. Coming from my own backyard, coming from DG24. The Ministry of National Defense sanctioned for blocking women's access to several military specializations. The Ministry of National Defense, MEAPN, lost a trial with the National Council for Combating Discrimination, or CNCD. The appeals court in Bucharest decided on April 1 that the exclusion of women from certain military specializations and the offering of a smaller number of spots for women compared to men in the military higher learning institutions consists an act of discrimination. This comes after MEAPN also lost a similar trial in November 2014 for the exact same reason, also against the CNCD. The ministry challenged the sanction in court, arguing that women's different and inconsistent hormonal cycle and the fact that they get pregnant constitutes a problem. Among other things, in its appeal, MEAPN argued that, quote, an approach free of limitations and constraints from the military decision factors in the admissions competitions in all our institutions of learning can lead to the most unfavorable results, such as having a disproportionate amount of women that is simply problematic. If all limitations are abolished, we may end up to 6 to 9 years from now to having an airplane escadrille or a helicopter escadrille be operated entirely by women. This, in practice, makes the escadrille unoperational for 4 to 5 days every month, or even completely unoperational if enough of them decide to get pregnant in the same period. The story starts in March 2015 when 17 NGOs united in the Anti-Discrimination Coalition filed a complaint with the CNCD claiming that the division by sex of the spots in the militarized learning institutions hasn't always been there and that the measure is discriminatory. Quote, the access of girls in military high schools, for instance, was first allowed in 2001. Between 2001 and 2004, there were no separate admission spots for girls and boys. The structure of the graduates for the period between 2005 and 2008 proves that the presence of girls was at least on par with the presence of boys, and their school performances and their graduation results were in many cases superior to the ones of their male colleagues, said the petition of the Anti-Discrimination Coalition. Now, what they don't tell you is what happened after the graduation. That is to say, most of the girls did not stick around for a career in the military, which essentially left the military quite short on personnel when they had to hire mercenaries in 2010. But then again, why leave reality and experience stand in the way? Anyway, back to the article. For the school year 2016-2017, there is no spot for girls in the militarized high schools, in spite of the sanctions from 2014. And then it goes on to list more numbers from various militarized education institutions around the country who have between 15 and 20% of their spots reserved for women, and how that's bad, blah, blah, blah. We'll skip that and go to the last paragraph, which is very weird. The solicitor for the Anti-Discrimination Coalition, Justina Ionescu, argues that, quote, lacking any real justification based on concrete science, you can prove that the persons of female sex cannot deal with the profession's rigors and working conditions. We can only conclude that these numbers are based on a tradition rooted in stereotypes and prejudice, which is not a reasonable nor acceptable explanation to limit the right to education and professional formation based on sex. She added that, quote, based on this reductionist and retrograde way of looking at women, former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton should have taken a vacation for 4 or 5 days a month alongside with the rest of working women, be they judges, engineers, or professors, end of quote. Now, am I the only one who notices that Hillary Clinton wasn't flying helicopters and F-16s?
Yeah.
I mean, the comparison, nobody suggested that female judges should take 4 or 5 days a month off because they go through the menstrual cycle. In fact, in this country,
after all.
Yeah, in this country, actually, 70% of the judges are women. So nobody is suggesting that women shouldn't be working at all. Or what the Ministry of National Defense does suggest is that, well, look, there are periods in every month when women don't do as well as they should when flying helicopters and F-16 and working in formations in escadrilles and things of that nature. And I think that's true. I mean, I know a lady who used to be a pilot on F-16, and she resigned on her own will because she thought the work was too stressful. And she told me pretty much the same thing. I mean, when she was on her period, there was no way she would go into that plane. And I think that's generally true, and I don't think that's it is discriminatory, but I don't think it's a bad thing to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to acknowledge reality.
Yeah. You know, when I made my video, is discrimination really that bad? I got a lot of vitriol for it. But at the end of the day, well, reality is discriminatory. Equality doesn't exist in nature. Is it really that bad to say that?
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, the military has to look at what can actually be effective. I mean, if they hire women, these women actually have to be able to do the job at the similar level as the male soldiers. And if they can't do that, then they're just not suitable. And
yeah, and what I'm also surprised is that the appeals court in Bucharest took some of these arguments at face value because, yes, it is true that, for instance, the Nicolae Bălcescu Academy in Sibiu only has 16% of their spots reserved for women. And okay, that's discriminatory, fine. But if you look at their website, of those spots reserved for women, just 60% of them were actually filled. So they didn't even have 16% female applicants. So it's not like anyone was de facto discriminated against. So
about these spots reserved for women, does it mean that if more than 70% of women or 70% of applicants are women, then they still can't have their. Is it basically?
yes,
It's saying that there's
essentially, if there are 200 places, 200 spots for this current year, 20 or 40 of them are reserved for women and 160 for men. So if 1,000 women apply, the best 40 of them get to enter. And if 1,000 men apply, the best 160 of them get to enter. That's how it works. It depends on the school, actually. I mean, this kind of thing is not established at the ministerial level. Every school has a different rule, but that's usually how it works. with the military high schools that I'm aware of.
So why do they do this? Why not just admit the 200 best qualified applicants regardless of sex?
Well, because military has pretty much similar rules with the police, whereas you have to be a certain height, a certain weight, a certain similar with the case that we discussed in Germany last
Hmm.
or 2 weeks ago. And abolishing all of those and imposing a single standard is something that the military leadership has been reluctant to accept because the previous minister of defense said pretty much like that. If we do that, then the European Union will eventually force us to lower the standards to get more women. So we won't do that. Period. Uh, and I find it hard to disagree with them because every time someone tried to go egalitarian, eventually there was some lawsuit or some European commissioner or some human rights ruling or whatnot that eventually forced them to lower the standards. Just today I read uh, in Britain they're changing the standard tests for joining military schools in Britain so that more women could pass them. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a one-way street. It's always a one-way street. So the bosses in the military here pretty much said, no, we're going to reject everything you say. Fuck you. We've been doing things in one way and it has been working. They tried, as this article also said, between 2001 and 2004, they tried a more egalitarian approach and it turned out to be a complete and utter disaster. Uh, because again, when the missions in Afghanistan started, the Romanian military had to quite literally hire mercenaries so they can have the amount of people required for that NATO operation. Because most of the girls, yes, they had very good results in the high schools and the higher learning in the military, but when it came to actual pursuing the career, they just dropped out.
Okay.
And now you can see them in politics in other places, and they just take pride. Well, I have a degree, a military degree. Yes, okay, but still, we spent a lot of defense money on you, and you're not doing defense. And
Yeah.
when the situation was proposed, that was in 2008 when this stupidity was abolished. Essentially, it was proposed that look, let's put in a more binding contract to the students. Yes, you'll get an egalitarian treatment, but you have to commit at least X amount of years in the military, like it's done with the intelligence services, and like it used to be done with the police services. Now that one has also been abolished, and it was refused by the parliament. It was called to be inhumane. Well, okay, if that is inhumane, then what else is left other than succumbing to the feminists, which is not an option.
Yeah, or people have to pay for their own training.
Well, I would like to have a private military, but unfortunately, that's not an option either.
Yeah, we have some sort of option where, if you then if after your training you stay in the military for some number of years, then that's fine. Otherwise, you have to if you drop out, you have to pay for the training.
Yeah, that's the system applied in the intelligence community for the two academies of the intelligence community, the Secret Service and things of that nature. That's the system applied there. Maybe that's an option for the military as well. I don't know. I'm not really that much informed about the internal dealings of the military. I used to be passionate about their work, and but I don't know. Maybe that's an option too, or should be. It's not right now, that's for sure. I mean, I have a friend who recently graduated from a military academy, and that's definitely not the system right now. But yeah, that could be an option to work around this huge dropout rate. But still, I mean, even if that were to be implemented, you still have, uh, let's say 1,000 students you rely upon, and then once they graduate, they drop out and don't pursue a career in the military. Yes, they pay your money back, but it's still time wasted, and you needed fresh, trained officers right now. What you do then? Because that was the biggest objection of those who reversed the system first implemented in 2001. That was their objection, not the spending itself, because the spending wasn't really that high, but the fact that it inconvenienced everyone and left the military short of personnel exactly when it was needed. And again, this is not the peacetime of 2007, 2008. This is a much less secure world today. So risking the leaving the military short of personnel exactly now, I don't know. I don't know if that's such a fabulous idea. Just so we can play around with egalitarianism. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from Austria, from Der Standard. 4 out of 10 primary school pupils unable to read and understand texts. It's not down to aversion to school. Pupils in the 4th grade of primary school in Austria have a positive attitude regarding school. 36% very much like to go to school, and another 34% like to go to school. They are also happy with their class. 53% are very satisfied with their class, another 30% are satisfied, and 12% have a neutral attitude toward their class. But this is just a side result of a new study called Standard Testing German in the 4th grade, which was conducted last May and tested 75,297 children at 2,995 primary schools. At the heart of the study was proficiency in German, and the results are anything but good. Several aspects of understanding the language were analyzed. Among other things, they examined how well pupils have learned to extract meaning from texts after 4 years of instruction. To this end, quote, age-appropriate linear and non-linear texts, the latter referring to things like tables and diagrams, of varying length and complexity were to be read. 62% of the pupils who took the test achieved or surpassed the curricular goals for reading competency and are proficient at reading and understanding texts. This means that almost 4 out of 10 children fall short of the reading standards. To be more precise, 25% of the children reach the standard in parts and possess rudimentary reading abilities. 13% don't meet any of the standards and have serious deficiencies. However, the researchers of the Federal Institute for Education Research, or BIFI, stress that, quote, this is less worrying than it seems at first glance. The results, they say, were merely, quote, not quite what you expect of the 4th grade. Minister Gabriele Heinisch-Hosek, an old friend of ours, has similar comments. Quote, the results show that the Austrian education system is working very well. She also sees advances.
Sorry.
She also sees advances compared to a study from 2010, which was based on narrower data. Researchers Simone Breit and Claudia Schreiner state that the improvements since then amount to 23 points for reading and 24 points for view of language, on a scale where the average results of the 2010 study are set to 500 points. This scale also allows for a comparison between different groups of pupils. And I'm just going to read the first of these 3 points, which is most relevant for our show. And that is, boys are lagging behind. In all aspects of the written language, boys' results are worse than girls' results by 25 to 33 points. When asked about how to get boys to catch up with the girls, the minister answered that textbooks were already being analyzed every year to eliminate outdated gender roles. Thanks a lot.
Jesus Christ. When are the next elections in Austria? I mean, if that's the Minister of Education, it has to go.
I actually don't know, sorry. I actually don't know when the next elections are in Austria.
Yeah, well, whenever they are, I hope they just vote for someone else. I mean, her answer is pretty much like that joke. A cow was residing in a tree and asks the other cow from the tree across the street, "What time is it?" And the other cow answers, "Wednesday." So that's pretty much the case in here. what should be done to get the boys to catch up? Oh, well, we're working to remove gender roles in the textbooks. No, we didn't ask about that. We didn't ask how to make books more girl-friendly or more feminist-friendly. We asked, what are you going to do about the boys lagging in reading or understanding text or whatever?
Basically, I think she assumes that the reason boys are falling behind is because they're harmed by these bad male gender roles, and if you remove those, then they're going to be good little girls.
Yeah, if that had been true, then we wouldn't have. I mean, I presume Austria has had similar trends like the rest of Europe, which is to generally experience an increase in literacy of the populace in the last 50 years or so.
Yep.
And I also presume that pupils' understanding of texts was higher at this level 25 years ago than it is now.
I'm not sure about that. I don't know.
Because I don't know, in Sweden, for instance, the more they feminize the curricula, the worse it got. Not just for boys, but particularly for boys. It also went bad. It also went worse for girls as well. The more they intervened in the curricula in ways that are not just unorthodox, but downright feminist, ideological, activist ways, the more things have gotten worse. I mean, this generation of pupils in Sweden now are at a significant disadvantage compared to the pupils of 20 years ago. In France as well, if you remember, we read an article about written by an expert in French education. It was a lady with a Polish name. I forgot her name. It was in Le Monde. I have to look in the archive to remember it. Also, the same thing. The fourth grader in 1970 would now be put into the 10th grade or something like that. I mean, the level was simply significantly more advanced 40 or 30 years ago. So that's why I'm assuming that Austria is pretty much in the same trend of dumbing down the education. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But if I'm wrong, then why on the other hand, on all the other indicators, it just kind of fits with the general trend. Boys lagging behind girls significantly compared to other periods of time. Increase in this in psychological terms, in sociological terms, it's called functional illiteracy, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know actually how big this gap is between boys and girls. So they have this scale where 500 points is this old study from 2010, and in this new study, I guess the average is something like 23% higher, 23 points higher. So girls are lagging behind by something like 2%. So I don't know how much it is
That's
in
within
terms
the
of standard
statistical.
deviations or whatever. I,
Yeah, 2% is within the statistical error.
yeah,
So,
it may not be. It depends on how this test is calibrated.
and I presume they don't provide the link with the methodology.
Yeah, I mean their standard is not exactly a very high quality paper.
Yeah, well, not even the high quality papers provide links anymore.
Yeah, basically the attitude is we're respectable, so you can trust us.
Yeah, I
So you
caught
don't
the
actually have to check links or something like that.
yeah, I caught the Economist lying like that with some feminist activist articles, premium articles for paying members, and also didn't have links, and I had to look them up for myself. And what a
Oh,
surprise it was!
actually, I've taken that back. They do provide the link to the study.
Oh yeah, okay, then maybe
So
we'll get.
well done, standard.
Yeah, well, they've just surpassed The Economist in this, so there's that. Maybe we'll get a time to read it and comment it many weeks from now, maybe. But still, the answer of the minister is what? Really?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered this particular person
Yeah.
in past articles, and it's sort of pretty much in line with what I would expect from her. She's, yeah, let's not talk about it.
Yep, yep. Okay, then, let's get to a more serious one, and long.
This is very long, which is why I've cut a lot of it, so that's actually a reasonable length. This one is from Die Welt from Germany. I no longer have one-night stands. Alexander Stevens defends voyeurs, rapists, and exhibitionists. The lawyer from Munich, who specializes in law governing sexual offenses, explains why harassment is not criminal and why it's better to abstain from quick sex. Though actually we're not going to cover the portions of the interview where it actually talks about those things. So, but there's still a lot of interesting things in what I have translated here. So the interviewer, Mr. Stevens, you specialize in sex. How did you come to this specialization? I had one case that really moved me because I am convinced that my client was unjustly convicted of rape. Witnesses confirmed that the initiative to go to his home with him came from the woman. During the taxi ride, they made out vitally, but afterwards, the woman said she only wanted to see his flat, but had been raped by him. But afterwards, she went with him to the balcony for a smoke. Nothing in the case fit together. And how did the story end? In the end, it was her word against his. The judge would have probably acquitted him, but the late judges were opposed. We grudgingly made a deal with the devil. My client made a tactical confession, and in exchange he only got a 2-year suspended sentence. Back then I was quite inexperienced. At university, law governing sexual offenses doesn't play any role. It isn't taught? No, this part of law is intentionally left out. They say they don't want to scare anyone off. Many find it repulsive. And skipping a long bit here, but some of the cases you described didn't even make it to court. What about, in quotation marks, Lola moans, which is sort of gives these cases these interesting names, and one of them is Lola moans. It's about an unemployed man who claimed to get obscene calls from a woman. The police managed to track the calls and learned that the phone belonged to a highly respected investment banker. They abandoned the case, but the man persisted. He waited in front of the police station, and when he received another call, he rushed in and held his mobile phone to an officer's ear. The police then went to the investment banker's home and found him sitting naked in something like a dog's cage, wearing a woman's wig, makeup, and ladies' stockings. Sounds like a funny story. Well, the prosecution dropped the case in exchange for a fine, and this is a case where a man was harassed for months. If that had happened to a woman, the result would probably have been a suspended jail sentence. Courts often apply double standards. Skipping another long bit here. You've been a lawyer for 6 years now. Have charges changed during this time? Nowadays, there are very few, how shall I say, classic rapes, by which I mean the kinds of rapes that the average layman envisions. A woman walking through a park at night is dragged behind the bushes. Almost all of my cases are within close relationships, either in a romantic relationship or in cases of previous contact. It's quite remarkable how many such cases are being reported. Because women are now more likely to dare to go to the police? On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, there are estimates that 50% of rape accusations are false. The Bavarian Criminal Police Office surveyed their officers in an internal study. They said that they assume that about half the charges are false. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is a lie. Sometimes just the judicial assessment is wrong. For example, in cases where the woman didn't really want to have sex, but went along with it anyway. And in retrospect, she thinks that the man should have noticed that. Or a friend says, that guy raped you. But in many cases, revenge, jealousy, or rejection are the motives for a false accusation. And then the interview goes on to talk about how this lawyer has stopped having one-night stands because he just sees how risky it can be. give some sort of tips that if you want to engage in that sort of behavior, you should get basically text the woman afterwards and sort of gets her to have some sort of permanent record of her having enjoyed the sex and so on. So I think this is a really interesting interview. Unfortunately, I had to leave most of the stuff out because it's really, really huge. I read about 1/3 of it. But yeah, it's a lot of this sort of confirmation of some of this stuff that many of us have long believed, and it's sort of interesting to see or good to see that it's getting coverage in the mainstream media.
That remark with the police, when no one is watching, they assume that roughly half of the reports are bollocks. And I don't doubt that's the case, because I used to have, well, actually I still do one or two. I never say I have friends in the police because I don't consider the police to be my friend ever. So I have acquaintances that used to work for the police or acquaintances in the police. But nonetheless, what I've heard, and I've spent long hours at a beer or something with former or current policemen, and they all told me that after several years in the service, you get quite a professional nose for bollocks. Now, obviously, sometimes that nose can be mistaken, but most of the time it's not. And I suppose it makes sense. I mean, it's the power of experience after all, and it probably happens in every single type of job, not just in the police force. Once you've seen a certain situation 100 times, so for the 101st time, you'll probably get a better assessment of it just by looking at it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess what the feminists would reply to that is that see, this just proves that we're living in a rape culture, and policemen don't believe women, and that's the reason why so many rapes go unreported and so on.
Yeah, well, it's not the job of the police to believe you. It's the job of the police to listen to you and then test your story against reality. It's not their business to believe you. Never has been.
Yep.
I mean, if I go tomorrow into a police station and report that I was robbed, for instance, or beaten, it is their job to take my statement and listen to my story, but it's not their job to believe me. I mean, it would be quite a horrible society where the police believes everything it's being told.
Yeah.
Although if we are to look at the feminists reacting in Canada after the Ghomeshi verdict, that's exactly how it should be. I mean, I don't know if you followed the story. I tried to follow it. Yeah, I tried to follow it because I had people on YouTube telling, "Well, you please do a video about the Ghomeshi trial," and eventually I decided against it because the amount of cancer was just over 90,000, not just over 9,000. And the moment I read an article, I don't remember on which feminist blog, in which quite literally they were arguing, well, there should be a presumption of guilt, and that's the fair way. And I was like, you should all be dropped from a helicopter into North Korea today. Right now, preferably. I mean, I wish they could invent teleportation so we could forcibly teleport you all straight into Pyongyang, so you can see what a presumption of guilt looks like in an actual court.
But to be fair, they can also prove that they don't deserve to be dropped into Pyongyang, and then they won't be.
They can prove what?
They can prove that they don't deserve to be dropped to North Korea.
They can't prove it to me. But still, yeah, you're correct in a way. I mean, they can prove that, but you cannot prove that you got consent or things like that. I mean, you can if you apply the advice that we sometimes mention passingly on this show: always be recording. But then that comes with its own set of problems. I mean, I don't know, is Germany a one-party or two-party country, or it depends on the Bundesland?
Very much two-party. Like if you like basically you're just not allowed to record people without their consent unless it's like in a public place, something like that, and you're just not recording some particular conversation or person, but just recording the surroundings or whatever. Then and you just accidentally catch someone or photograph someone or something like that. But otherwise, if you're like specifically trying to photograph or record someone, you need their consent.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I were that kind of person engaging in one-night stands and whatnot, I would just simply ignore that law and record every single one-night stand. Because if something bad happens, well, the punishment for recording without consent is minuscule and bearable, rather than the punishment for the false punishment for a crime that did not happen.
Yeah, and Germany doesn't have this sort of what is it called, the doctrine of the poisoned tree. That if you do some illegal activity that results in getting evidence, and this evidence can't be admitted in court, which is the way it usually works in, for example, the United States. But in Germany, that's not the case. If you legally obtain some evidence, you can still admit that evidence. You might be punished for legally attaining it, but the evidence itself can still be used.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing here. It used to be like in the US, and it was changed actually a long time ago, around 20 years ago, when a very young Supreme Court judge ascended to the Supreme Court, and he said, look, in the next century, everyone will be able to record anything. So having these kinds of stupid statutes that ban recording and whatnot is just insane. It's not going to work in the real world. Uh, Either way, I mean, it makes more sense like that. I mean, the punishment for recording without consent, it's usually a fine. It cannot be more than that. I find it hard to believe that someone would go to jail for recording something on his or her own property. Although in Germany, I've just read a lady was sent to jail for refusing to pay the ZDF fee, so I don't know. I mean, upcoming video on that one as well. I mean, seriously. So yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, it's worth risking paying a fine sometime in the future, maybe or maybe not, rather than risk serving some time in jail for something you clearly did not do.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of paying fines, let's get to the next one, coming from the neighbors from La France. France outlaws paying for sex. Oh, here we go again. France has outlawed buying sex after more than 2 years of heated debate, passing a law on Wednesday that slaps a €1,500 fine on those who pay for prostitutes whilst decriminalizing the sex workers themselves. Repeat offenders stand to pay €3,750 and face being sent on compulsory classes to learn the perils of prostitution. The new legislation, inspired by a similar 1999 law in Sweden, of course, means France now has one of the toughest laws against sex buyers in Europe, along with Norway and Iceland. This is an historic step, the editors at the Telegraph, in the quest for women's rights, said Grégoire Théry, head of the Le Mouvement d'Uni, which wants to abolish prostitution. Do they also want to abolish air? It's a revolution in the country of Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the Moulin Rouge, and the Little Women of Pigalle, or the Red Light District, he added. French politicians had for months been at loggerheads over the law. The left-wing majority in the lower house approved the legislation only to see it twice rejected by the majority right-wing Senate. But the National Assembly on Wednesday had the final word. Prostitution is currently legal in France, but in 2003, the conservative government passed a law banning passive soliciting by prostitutes on the street. The new legislation scraps that measure, which is rarely enforced, judging by the droves of prostitutes who stroll around Parisian districts like Belleville, seeking custom in broad daylight. Also, brothels, pimping, and sale of sex by minors remain illegal. The new law also makes it easier for foreign prostitutes, who make up an estimated 80% of the country's 40,000-odd sex workers, many illegal immigrants, to acquire a 6-month temporary residence permit if they enter a process to get out of the prostitution business. Fines will be channeled into a special fund to help prostitutes leave the game and which will receive 4.8 million euros from the French state each year. The debate over whether to penalize the customers of prostitutes became a cause célèbre for some French stars, with Catherine Deneuve and Charles Aznavour among 60 Gallic celebrities who signed a petition to protest against it, arguing it will only serve to drive the sex trade further underground. More controversially, a group of writers, actors, and public figures who have been, go to, or will go to prostitutes released a manifesto of 343 bastards entitled Hands Off My Whore. We believe that everyone has the right to freely sell their charms, and even to like doing so. And we refuse that MPs decree norms on our desires and our pleasures, it claimed. Many sex workers are against the law, and some demonstrated in front of Parliament on Wednesday. We can already see the consequences of the law, said Morgan Morteuil of the sex workers union Strasse. Those who are able are leaving to work in neighboring countries. The others are looking for agencies, saloons, intermediaries who will play the role of pimps and put them in touch with clients, she said. But Mo Olivier, a socialist MP who drew up the text, said it will help fighting trafficking networks and, again the editors of the Telegraph, I'm proud that our country is passing this law, which means prostitutes are now seen as victims, not delinquents, she told Agence France-Presse. It was, she added, vital to, quote, no longer consider it normal to buy someone's body, end quote. I thought it was renting. Anyway, we will end up changing mentalities, but it will take time and some explaining with training for police, gendarmes, and magistrates, she said. However, some experts said that those who buy sex over the internet are unlikely to be caught by the new law. Dating websites are one of the main ways to connect prostitutes and clients, said sociologist Laurent Melito. Then people call each other. How are you going to control that? Another one busts the dust. Another one goes. Another one goes.
Another one goes full Sweden.
Another one goes full Sweden. Yeah. Seriously, what makes the obviously failing Swedish model so attractive to so many legislatures? What's so appealing of it?
I guess that it's that they hate prostitution, but they don't want to be seen as doing something against women, because prostitutes, they're seen as exploited and weak and vulnerable, so you don't want to go after them. So instead you go after the Johns, who are seen as the exploiters and the more powerful people, and therefore going after them is perfectly okay. They just conveniently ignore the fact that this will, of course, also hurt the prostitutes. But it's not as direct, so it's easier to ignore that.
It's easy to cover up in some rhetorical cloak. Okay, but what makes it so appealing for the left? Because just like in other jurisdictions where this kind of stupidity was approved, it was usually the traditional right wing rejecting this kind of approach, and usually the traditional left adopting it or pushing for it. What makes it so attractive to the left? It's just the feminist leaning of the left. Is nothing else in there?
Also, just a general idea that you should always protect the people who are weak and vulnerable, and you should always favor people who are without power or low in power, which the right does not really see in that way. So if the right wants to, is to the extent that it is against prostitution, it just wants to ban it altogether and to focus more on punishing the prostitutes which I guess is if you actually want to get rid of prostitution, which you can't, but if you were to try, then focusing on that is the more effective approach, in the same way that if you want people to stop people from selling anything, it's usually easier to go after the people selling than after the people buying.
Yeah, punish the
Just because
supply more.
just because there's usually a lot fewer sellers and buyers, so you don't have to go after as many people.
Hmm. Although there are places, for instance, Texas in the United States, where they punish both the Johns and the Janes, and they invest so much. I mean, it was in a district of Houston. I know this because I made a video about this law in France, and I I was trying to find examples of corruption that emerges whenever prostitution is illegal. And that's how I learned that they spend a tremendous amount of resources in Texas, sending undercover police officers, both men and women, and the females pose as whores, as hookers, and the policemen pose as solicitors, so they can trap as many solicitors of prostitution and as many whores as possible, and then drag them all to jail and ruin even more people's lives. And I'm like, but all for what? I mean, everyone loses from such an approach. Who the hell wins?
Yeah, I guess it's more about purity. That this idea that prostitution is impure, it's polluting, it's
It
just
is.
inherently
So fucking
evil and
what?
has to be stamped out. Therefore,
Well, it's not evil, but it is impure. It is polluting. But so fucking what? It's an imperfect world. I mean, it doesn't convince me, and I'm the token conservative here. It doesn't convince me, this argument. Oh my God, it's a degenerate behavior. Yes, it is. So fucking what? I mean, uh, at the end of the day, prostitutes, most of them are not victims, because the leftist approach is, oh, we're gonna look at them as victims instead of criminals or something like that. They said something here, and I'm like, well, in other words, yeah, victims, not delinquents. In other words, you're transforming all of them into children. I mean, you're telling me that the overwhelming majority of the sex workers or hookers or whores or whatever, they're not victims, never have been victims, and they're perfectly responsible adults who choose to go into this profession, and you're telling, no, 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 all of you are stupid. We know better. How much of an egomaniac you have to be?
yeah, it's very, very, very condescending. The very paternalistic attitudes, and yeah, it really does it really only makes sense if you view them as being children.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, as you said, when the right wants to get rid of something, they go full honest and full Macintosh over it. Look, we're gonna target that. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. It's going to be great, and it usually isn't, but at least they try. But this approach of sugarcoating it and oh my God, we're gonna look at hookers as victims instead of delinquents. That's that's very dehumanizing. I mean, you're essentially denying their entire agency. I mean, the Puritans, when they want to use the violence of the state, the right-wing Puritans, when they want to use the violence of the state to stamp out prostitution, at least they acknowledge the humanity of the hookers and the fact that most of them do choose to get into that. And their argument is, well, they chose to break the law, so they have to bear the consequences. But these Swedish feminist way of thinking is like, no, 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 all the hookers are stupid. We know better because we thought about it in a saloon at the Uppsala University, because that's where the stupidity was born. There and in the shelters of rocks, those man-hating feminists who kidnap women, take them to Norway, and then convince them that they were in fact saved, which is actually what they do. I'm not joking. So yeah, I mean, dare I say, this kind of policy, considering the fact that the overwhelming majority of sex workers are women, this kind of policy is genuinely misogynistic. I mean, it genuinely assumes that all those women in there are stupid, and the parliament simply knows better.
Yeah, pretty much.
Also, another loophole in this, we're gonna give permits to foreign prostitutes who are illegal immigrants and whatnot. Who wants to bet that there will be a surge in foreign prostitutes in France? Not actual prostitutes, but from a legal standpoint. I mean,
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's
if I were a woman seeking to immigrate into France, I would definitely watch the official monitor, the official paper of the state, and when this law gets into force, I would go straight to France by any means, and then go to a police station and claim that I'm a victim of prostitution. Uh, it's the easiest way, and once you get the first temporary permit, then prolonging it is not really a problem. You just have to be patient, and it's going to be prolonged indefinitely. Uh, it seems like nobody actually thought this through when they wrote the text.
yeah, and I mean, I don't even know how it would go about proving that you were a prostitute or that you are a prostitute. I mean,
It's definitely not about proof. I mean, whenever they have this kind of thing with foreign victims of sexual assault and things like that, Italy used to have a similar protection, and they abolished it precisely for this reason. Because when they actually started, you know, when well, they say they're fascists. I say that they're just a bit weird. When the last right-wing government of Italy had to bring in Lega Nord into the government in order to make sure that they will have a stable government. You know, those are a bit more socially conservative, a bit more extreme, and say, wait a minute, let's start checking at least some of these alleged sexual assault and prostitution victims and whatnot foreign. You know, why do we give permits to all of them? Do we really know that they were victimized? And once they started looking into them, it turned out that a significant majority of them have never been victimized, or if they were, they weren't victimized in Italy, and Italy actually had no duty to them at all. But because of a similar law that was meant to protect victims of sexual violence or something like that, it was the law essentially being a teenager or a woman, it was almost a guarantee that you would get a residence permit in Italy, regardless of anything. I mean, you could have literally been convicted for terrorism in Tunisia, and you could still get a permit for being a victim in Italy, especially if you're a woman. It was very hard to obtain if you were a man, but if you're a teenager or a woman, very easy. And of course, when they proposed to abolish it, the left went full Macintosh, that, oh my God, they're insensitive and whatnot. Eventually, it was abolished, but I don't think they were insensitive. I think they were quite sensible when they did that.
yeah, but I mean, in this case, I don't even know how you would check for that. Like, you can just claim that you worked as a prostitute, just not in any sort of organized brothel or anything like that, but just on your own, having sex in your own apartment or whatever. How are they going to disprove that?
hmm hmm Well, you can post a few announcements on the internet and whatnot, and then wait for a while. I mean, you can post announcements from whatever country. You don't have to be in France, and you can post the I can actually order announcements in the printed version of Le Monde, and I can do that from my office here in Cluj. So you know, I can order a few announcements from wherever you are in the world, and then wait for a while, get the paper newspaper, and say, look, I used to work. Here's announcements by me, and I was getting clients on the apartment. Good luck disproving that.
Yeah. Also, another thing that always just really bothers me is when you talk about people selling their bodies. That's not what they're doing.
They're renting
Because
it at best.
not even that. Because I mean, by that standard, um, people just doing any sort of ordinary employment are also
Mhm.
selling or renting their bodies, and
Which they
no
do.
one.
I'm fine with that kind of analogy, and I think it should be legal.
But you're not renting your body, you're just selling labor services.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Uh, and you know, even if that were true, I mean, even if the analogy would be impeccable, I still fail to see the problem. Uh, we're gonna change mentalities, and it's great that it is no longer considered normal to buy someone's body. Who the hell do you think you are? Because it betrays this kind of assumption that you don't actually own your body. The state just assumes to own it for you.
Yeah, maybe that sort of language is supposed to create a parallel to slavery, but it just doesn't really work because it's completely voluntary.
Yeah. Anyway, I've issued several more comments about that on my channel, so if anyone is really curious and even more dissecting about this, can check that one out. Let's get the next one.
Okay, the next one is from the Telegraph from the UK. Oxford theology students can skip Christianity lessons. Theology students at Oxford will no longer be required to study Christianity throughout the course for the first time in 800 years after undergraduates complained about lack of diversity. Changes are being made to the degree to mirror shifts in religious beliefs and culture in the wider British society, according to academics. Instead, those in second year will have the option to take papers which will include feminist approaches to religion and theology, the Times Higher Education magazine reported. Johannes Zachhuber, professor of historical and systematic theology and the theology faculty's board chairman, suggested students could avoid studying Christianity altogether and instead favor subjects such as Buddhism in space and time. Professor Zachhuber said, "We recognize that the people who come to study at Oxford come from a variety of different backgrounds and have legitimately different interests. They come from the respected communities of Britain. If you have a very rigid curriculum, there will be an increasing mismatch between what lecturers are doing in their research time and what they are having to teach." He said that a massive generational turnover of lecturers was a trigger for one-third of posts being filled by often younger staff. He said, "The major driver for change for theology and religion is the dramatic change in the way religion is seen and practiced in the UK. The dominance of the Church of England has been receding, but at the same time religion hasn't disappeared. We want to offer to potential students what is interesting for them, and that has changed a lot in the last 30 years.
Well, good news, I would say.
Because?
Well, because they're introducing feminism in the theology degree. I mean, feminism is a religion. We've been saying this for years now. And what is a better place to start than the theology faculty in Oxford to actually start pushing a recognition of this undeniable fact that feminism is a religion?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean,
I'm joking, obviously.
Feminism is sort of like a pseudo religion in a way.
It's cultish enough.
Yeah, but this course is called Feminist Approaches to Religion and Theology. It doesn't claim that feminism itself is part of theology.
Well,
Just
but
that,
you can have an Islamic approach to religion and theology, so and such a phrasing also would not imply that Islam is part of theology, even though it is. So
yeah,
it's just the first step. I mean, the recognition of a new religion in the theology department is a very long process. It takes time.
okay.
I mean, there was no serious theological study in Oxford of Islam when Oxford was founded. I mean, it took several hundred years until Islam was included in the theology faculty of Oxford. So it takes time until feminism will be understood as a full-fledged religion by the theology faculty. But baby steps. In a more serious manner, we're both atheists. We're not really big fans of religion, but nonetheless, I'm asking, how can one be a decent theologian or even a sub-mediocre theologian if one hasn't studied Christianity at all for one's theology degree? How is that supposed to work? mean, it sounds to me like getting a degree in mathematics without, never studying limits or things like that, or integral calculus. I mean, it doesn't compute to me.
Yeah, basically saying I'm a mathematician, but I don't know anything about set theory. Who needs that
Yeah,
anyway?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's pretty much it. I mean, or I'm a
Because mathematics
physicist.
has changed over the last 30 years, and
Yeah, well, it did in a way, but not in that kind of way. So, or I'm a physicist, but don't bring up relativity. I mean, who the hell needs that? Uh, that's what I'm hearing when I hear, oh, you can get a theology degree without studying Christianity at all. I mean, really? And I can understand getting a theology degree without having to study, I don't know, some random 10,000 members cult in, I don't know, southern Japan or something like that. I can understand that. But without studying Christianity, I mean, how the hell do you?
I mean, I could understand if it was a degree in, say, Islamic theology or something like that. I mean, even then,
Even they study Christianity.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the
yeah. It,
theology faculty in the University of Tehran definitely does teach Christianity as well.
yeah, but at least if it was like a specific degree in theology of some other religion, then I could maybe understand it. Though again, in the case of if Islam, that's hard because Islam and Christianity are quite closely related. Um, but okay, let's say you study, say, Buddhist theology or something like that. Then Christianity does not really intersect with that very much.
Yeah,
So
it's a
then
very marginal
then
topic.
I guess it would make sense, or would be somewhat reasonable to offer the option of not studying anything about Christianity. But if you just a general degree in theology, then somehow studying something about the world's largest religion is kind of relevant, maybe. Uh, and it's especially the case if you're in the UK, which is still a majority Christian country. I mean, it's not no longer quite as Christian as it used to be, 50 years or 100 years ago, but it's still a majority Christian. And the idea that there can be a theologian who knows nothing about Christianity is just absurd.
Yep, pretty much. And yeah, well, I have nothing further to add. I mean, it's just, and it never stops in the academia. Every week there's even more stupidity. It's even more these kinds of completely ridiculous policies that are sometimes justified in this fashion. Oh, but the students demand it. Well, so what? That doesn't mean the students are correct.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, the physics students saying we don't want to study um, we don't want to study relativity or quantum mechanics because the math is hard or something like that. Well, so what? It's still important. You still have to do it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is the part that I don't understand with certain universities, because it's definitely, actually, it's the least bad in Oxford, as we'll see soon. In others, it's significantly worse. But I still don't understand this kind of thing. Oh my God, the students demanded it, so we must abide, or otherwise potato. Well, I'm sorry, but can't you have a little bit of balls? I mean, after all, I understand that it's a private business. After all, Oxford definitely is, um, and there is some pressure on you from the student body, but I don't think there is such a huge pressure, and I don't think there is. Uh, I mean, I don't think Oxford would be in a danger, in a financial danger, if they would just say to the social justice warriors, "Well, tough luck. If you want diversity, I don't know, get the hell out of here. Go to Luton and watch the airport. There's a lot of diversity in there. Goodbye." That's what I would do. I mean, seriously, when someone would tell me that there's not enough diversity in something, I'm like, well, if it's in London, and I would say, well, take the train, the tube, and go. I think it's the Red Line, and go to the Luton airport. There's a lot of diversity in there. Enjoy. Goodbye. That's what I would do. If it's anywhere else, I usually suggest them a very diverse area of a city in Europe. And, just take the plane and go and enjoy your diversity. I mean, it's not supposed to be. Uh, it's not supposed to be like that. The students just come and whine, and then everyone just rearrange the world according to that. The institutions of higher learning used to be a slightly higher than that. Even the private ones. I mean, especially the private ones.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to have a particular degree, then you sort of have to study some of the very relevant material in that field. And if your field is theology, then learning a bit about Christianity is pretty much required. And I don't see that this is in some way against diversity. I mean, you can still take some courses in Christianity and also courses in feminist approaches to whatever, and Buddhism in space and time, whatever that's supposed to be, and study of some sort of mystery cult that has 1,000 adherents somewhere, whatever. And that would be a very diverse education, but still you should at least know something about Christian theology if you want to call yourself a theologian.
Yep, yep. Or here's something to trigger social justice warriors with. Christianity is diverse in and of itself. I mean, there's Arab Christians. It's the largest growing religion in China. It's still the majority religion in most countries of Europe, not all of them. So, it's widely spread in South America, which is a very multiracial and very diverse place. So Christianity itself is diverse. Watch social justice warriors argue against that.
Yeah, there's also, of course, lots and lots of different denominations in Christianity.
Yeah, although the Catholic Church still has a very strong influence upon that.
I mean, but even within the Christianity, there's still a decent amount of diversity between different. Well, they all are sort of unified, and they all view the Pope as being the vicar of Christ and so on. But
not here. I mean, the Orthodox world, we don't view the Pope like that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Catholics.
Yeah, but you're saying even within the Catholic Church,
within Catholicism, there's still a lot of different thoughts. There's liberal Catholics, there's conservative Catholics, there's liberation theology and all that sort of stuff that.
There's even a Pentecostal current within the Catholic Church. Even some cardinals are adhering to it. Cardinals that reside at the Vatican. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Yes, people want to bring back the Latin Mass, and there's people in basically people. I don't know. I forgot how they're called. They're basically a kind of mixture of Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism.
Greek Catholicism.
No, that's not what we're talking about. Who are in communion with the Catholic Church, but they're mostly keeping the sort of rituals of the Orthodox Church. I forget how they're called.
Yeah, that's Greek Catholicism. That's how it's called here. It's the Greek Catholic Church united with Rome. That's how it's called. Okay. It's called here, and they're de facto Orthodox, but they're united with Rome, as their name obviously implies. I don't know. Maybe they have a different name in other parts of the world, but that's how they're called here. They suffered quite a lot of persecution under communism. The commies took all their properties and gave them to the Orthodox. There's still an unended scandal on that. All right, we've stepped away too far. Let's get back to the insanity in the academia, which the next article also treats.
Okay, this one is from the Daily Mail. University student is ordered not to put her hand up to ask the question because she would be violating her classmates' safe space. A student was almost kicked out of a meeting after she violated a safe space by raising her arm at Edinburgh University. Imogen Vâlsan wanted to make a point at Thursday's student council session when she was told off by officials. The vice president for academic affairs at the university's student association was accused of failing disabled students by not responding to an open letter. She immediately raised her arm to disagree, but was made the subject of a ludicrous complaint and told not to make the gesture again. Imogen was also warned for shaking her head during the meeting, as it again breached the safe space, which is part of the university's student association rules. She told the Huffington Post, "I raised my arms in disagreement as we had contacted the writers of the letter and tried hard to organize a meeting. It was for that reason that a safe space complaint was made." Student association policy says that council members should be respectful and considerate. Section 6C of the safe space policy is defined as refraining from hand gestures which denote disagreement or in any other way indicate a disagreement with a point or points being made. Disagreement should only be evident through the normal course of debate. A vote took place to decide whether Imogen should be removed from the meeting after she was accused of breaking the rules. The vote was in her favor, with 18 people for removal and 33 supporting her staying. Imogen added, "I completely understand the importance of our safe space policy, and I will defend it to the ground, but I did not think that was fair, and had it gone further, I would have either left or argued against it." One student, a fourth year who wished to remain anonymous, said the complaint was ludicrous and was an abuse of the entire intent of safe space. "We were having one of the most emotionally tense councils of the year, with a vote on the BDS, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movements, and people speaking who live in Palestine or are Israeli on both sides of the issue. There was ample risk of there being an actual safe space issue taking place, an anti-Semitic or Islamophobic comment, for instance, but the whole debate was actually remarkably civil, despite how emotional it was." First-year Edinburgh student Charlie Peters tweeted against the safe space policy and set up a petition against it. By yesterday afternoon, it had 1,000 signatures. "Safe space now censors inappropriate hand gestures, but university is becoming pathetic," he told his Twitter followers. The user have been contacted by Mail Online for comment.
And they haven't responded to that comment. Oh my god, the BDS. Yeah, I'll try to reframe my comments. Suffice to say that there is over 9,000 amount of disdain for the BDS coming from this microphone. Okay, the safe space policy. Why does such stupidity even exist? Please remind me.
Because otherwise people wouldn't be safe and fees could be hurt.
Whenever I hear these words, British university and safe space, the first thing that pops into my mind is the video made by Pat Condell about safe spaces, in which he suggested that the solution for safe spaces is sending in the most brash rugby players in there and have them have a party in their safe space with all the foul language that comes with that. And if anyone objects for having their safe space violated, a fish should be used to kick their faces with the fish until they wake up to the actual reality where safe spaces don't exist. But he formulated it in a very British way that it's just funny. That's what comes into my mind whenever I hear about this thing of safe space. Really, she raised her hand to note the disagreement, or actually it wasn't even disagree at first. It was just to note that, hold on a second, we already contacted the authors of the letter and we tried to organize a meeting. They haven't responded yet. So it wasn't even, at first, it wasn't even a disagreement. It was just, point of information, which is standard in any civilized debate.
Yeah, but if you're called out for being for taking some sort of oppressive action against a group with a weaker power status than you, then you're not supposed to object. You're not supposed to correct people. You're just supposed to apologize. That's the only thing you can do. That's the only thing you're allowed to do, according to the ideology.
If I ever get a bigger YouTube star, I'll make my own funding just to go and troll British universities. I would definitely do this. I mean, I've studied the rules, and I think it is possible to be to sign up just for one semester to 3 or 4 universities at the same time. It's not really that expensive if you know how to navigate the rules. And I would just go to trigger them all the time. Uh, really, and I think I have to do it myself personally because whenever I suggest to other people to do it, they were like, "Oh, come on, that's a bit too extreme." Whereas I consider that I'm pulling my punches whenever I make these suggestions. I mean, these kinds of people just need to be woken up to reality, and I see no other way to wake up but just to get in there and just mock them mercilessly and without any sort of apology. What did I trigger you? Oh well, fuck you. So what? No, and I think that there is a genuine need. I quite agree with Pat Condell. Okay, not really hit them with a wet fish, but I agree with the broader message that Pat Condell tried to transmit. That someone just quite literally needs to bulldoze the safe space. Uh, the mentality of the safe space. Just get in there with the boots and just trash it constantly and unapologetically. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to suspend me, or you're going to write an angry letter on Twitter, or the student union will say that I'm no longer allowed to buy juice um, from the union shop or things like that, because there's not really anything they can do to you. And that's the part that many of these students don't seem to be able to understand. They can't really do much to you, and especially they wouldn't be able to do anything to me. I mean, what are you going to do? Expel me from the university? Well, my purpose here is to troll you. So, and usually you won't get expelled. I mean, at least in Britain, the administrators don't seem to be really that much on board with the activist students, as opposed to Jesus Christ, what was that campus where Melissa Click used to work? The University of Missouri, where do you have portions of the professorial class who also go along with this nonsense. That's not really that common in Britain, so there's that.
Yeah, also, I mean, the whole thing about of a safe space is really a misnomer because it's not a place for being safe. It's a place for not having your feelings hurt.
And for ideas to be safe, as if ideas have rights.
Yeah, I mean, British universities are already safe places. There's a very low amount
Absolutely.
of crime there, very low amount of violence, and any wars fought in Britain currently, anything like that.
Hmm.
So already very safe. I
Hmm.
mean, not perfectly safe, but of course, perfect safety is not really possible. But it's one of the safer places on Earth, definitely.
Hmm.
And because I mean, I'm all in favor of people being safe. That is, safe from violence, from aggression, and so on. But not safe from having their ideas challenged. Because if you don't want to have your ideas challenged, you shouldn't go to university.
Yeah, I usually don't quote Richard Dawkins, but in this case, he's right. I mean, if you want a safe space, uh, drop out, go home, and start sucking your thumb until you grow up to the mental level where you no longer need a safe space. Uh, I mean, that's essentially my view as well. These students are supposed to be adults, are supposed to be in their early 20s. Uh, if they can't bear any minor disagreement over a contentious topic uh, such as inherent anti-Semitism of the BDS movement, for instance, I mean, if you can't bear any disagreement on that, then what next? I mean, presumably most of them are studying in order to eventually work somewhere. And in the workplace, well, the workplace is not really a safe space, and cannot be, because if it would be, it could go bankrupt. Because instead of vigorous disagreement to maybe reach a better conclusion that can save you in the market, keeping a safe space, well, Your client from India will not. Essentially, your competitor, sorry, from India will not, or from China, or from Mexico, or from whatever, Nigeria, soon enough.
Yeah. On the topic of the BDS movement, can we start calling them BDSM? Can we make that a thing?
Yeah, I went one day on a Facebook page of a BDS campaign from, I don't know, it was an American university, but I don't remember exactly which campus. And, I just placed there a picture with a Hamas leader eating, Jewish Israeli grapes. And, with the caption beneath it was, not even Mahmoud Abbas can resist Israeli agriculture or something like that. Um, and the thread beneath it lasted for like 6 months. It was active, and even 6 months later I would still get notifications on Facebook from triggered students. uh, then I learned that the admin of that page just simply renounced using Facebook, so there was no moderator, so everything remained there, and you could trigger as much as you pleased because there was no one to ban you. And it was amazing to me how uh, 19, 20-year-olds who had read nothing about Israel. I mean, I asked one of them to show me Israel on the map. I placed a blank map and, just draw a circle wherever you think Israel is. You have 5 minutes. Uh, Without looking at on Google, obviously. And, I got some of them locating Israel like 6,000 kilometers away from where Israel actually is. But otherwise, they had a lot of opinions about what oppression goes on there, and I'm like, is this really what the universities are preparing for the future?
Yeah.
Because I can understand legitimate disagreement and whatnot, but when someone who can't even locate the disputed area on the map to come in and tell me that they know more about it, I'm like, come on, really?
But you don't need facts if you can have opinions, as long as they have the correct opinions.
Yeah, and that's the safe space, after all, isn't it? Just having the correct opinions and not triggering anyone, and that's fine. That's just fucking creepy, man. It really is.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Also,
creepy
these
things, go ahead.
safe spaces are so safe you can't even make facial expressions there because that would also denote disagreement. It's like such a crazy policy. You can't denote disagreement in any way other than during the normal course of debate. So you can't have facial expressions. Basically, that's really interesting rules.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, if these are the rules, then what am I supposed to do whenever they spew batshit crazy stuff? Just stay with a straight face, and then when finally the word is given back to me and I can speak, I have to somehow not try to infer with my tone that I my complete and utter disdain for the opponent's position and just say very calm. Well, I believe you're just completely full of shit because how do you do that? I mean, I would have to take some antidepressant pills or something like that to make me be that unemotional, that psychopathic. I mean, I can understand controlling your emotions and the need for that, and I totally agree. But come on, really, facial expressions and mind you, this is not the first case. There was 2 years ago a case with a professor who was suspended for giving unfair looks or something like that. Also, I think it was also in Oxford. I don't remember. I'll have to look for it. It's an article from 2014 in Metro, but I don't remember. But it was also because he looked the wrong way at two students. That was essentially. He was suspended for almost a year from his academic career because of that. He was eventually found not guilty of harassment, mind you, so there's that. But still. Okay, and let's get to the last one. I know we started with 5 minutes delay, but still. Okay, trigger warning for anyone eating. Well, you might want to stop listening to this show and then listen to the last 10 minutes some few hours later. If you're planning to eat 20 minutes from now and not right now. Coming from metro.co.uk, presenting vagina beer. Yes, it's beer made using vaginas. Hello and welcome to 2016, a time when people have sex on hoverboards and you can purchase beer created from the essence of vaginas. Yep, it's real, presenting bottled instinct. It's beer, but made using vaginal bacteria. Not just any vaginal bacteria, mind you, lactic acid bacteria from the vagina of Czech model Alexandra Brendlova. Of course. Created by vagina-themed startup The Order of Yoni, Bottled Instinct is a beer that promises to capture the essence of femininity. Its makers created by taking bacteria from the vagina using a gynecological stick. This stick goes to a laboratory where the lactic acid bacteria are isolated and cleaned, then multiplied. That bacteria is then used in a culture starter kit, and it's combined with water, malt, hops, wooden chips, and yeast to create the beer. The Order of Yoni says the beer has no vaginal smell or taste, but it has been flavored with instincts and brewed with model Alexandra's lure and grace. Which, you know what, is all well and good. Why not add the joy of vaginas into the fun of alcohol? Go ahead, we don't judge. But then you get to the Order of Yoni's marketing. On their Indiegogo campaign, and yes, they're trying to raise 150,000 euros, the Order of Yoni suggests that by using a woman's vaginal bacteria, their beer is like having a woman in a beer form. By which we mean, yes, the entire campaign is very, very sexualized. And here comes the fun part of the article. The quote, imagine a woman of your dreams, your object of desire, reads the product description. Her charm, her sensuality, and her passion. Try her taste, feel her smell, hear her voice. Imagine her messaging you passionately and whispering into your ear everything you want. Now free your fantasies and imagine that with a magic wand, and you can close it in one bottle of beer. Oh yes, this bottle of beer will fulfill all of your sexual fantasies. Who need a woman when you can have sexy, sexy vagina beer? There's also the depressing standards for the vaginas the Order of Yoni uses for its beer production. A lot of time has been devoted to finding the kind of a female whose pheromones will stay with you, meaning a sexually attractive model that personifies femininity, natural charm, and lure. The Order of Yoni states that potential models offering up their vaginas for beer production will have to sign a contract with high penalty for working in adult industry, sex industry, as adult actress, escort, prostitute, etc. Because having paid for sex will affect the beer-making quality of a woman's vagina bacteria, obviously. If you're not enraged enough yet, well, take a read through the Order of Yoni's plans for future beers. If fully funded, they want to expand into BDSM ale, made use of vaginal lactic acid bacteria of a woman with brown or red hair, and a blonde ale, using a blonde model's vag. All of which makes us think that vagina beer isn't actually about the beer-making benefits of vaginal bacteria. It's just a very, very objectifying way to tell men that they're drinking women. It's sexy, right? Anyway, if you fancy contributing to the Indiegogo campaign, there are all kinds of perks on offer. 39 euros will get you a voucher for one beer and a branded glass. Other donations will get you signed posters of Alexandra Brendlova, the Order of Yoni polo shirts and belts. Oh, and if you donate 10,000 euros, the Order of Yoni will make you a special beer using your girlfriend's vagina. So romantic. Why is the author of this article expect us to be enraged by this? I mean, I'm not convinced it's serious, although I clicked the links and it seems that it is serious. But why should one be enraged by it? I mean, presumably they haven't pressured Alexandra Brendlova to join their campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand finding that disgusting, but
yeah, I can also understand finding it disgusting, but enraging.
Yeah, enraging. I mean, she agreed to do this, and Yeah, it's sexualized, but what did you expect from vagina beer?
Yeah.
I mean,
The story is so what the fuck that you don't really know what to say.
yeah. Also, why are there wooden chips in the beer? What the fuck? What are you doing?
Well, if it's a black beer, it actually makes sense. Some not all types of wood, but some uh, pieces of wood are being placed into the liquid during the fermentation process, and that's actually quite standard for black beer. Which black beer is not really that popular within the traditional beer makers in Germany. It's a thing more like Bohemia and Czech Republic and things like that.
Okay.
That makes sense. This whole process of going to the laboratory or whatnot, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, it sounds like something.
Yeah, it's basically just a gimmick. So they say that you can actually taste there's an actually taste of vagina or anything like that. So it's just
Looks like a homeopathic uh, treatment, quote unquote treatment.
yeah.
Because homeopathy is the dilution uh, way beyond the Avogadro's number, so it's essentially you're drinking basic water. But I mean, that's pretty much the same kind of process that is being described here. Nonetheless, the fact that I just clicked again on the campaign to see if they exceeded 1,000 euros. They did. They're at 1,103 euros. Well, they're still a long way until 150,000. But it does seem that it worked. I mean, if their purpose was to trigger and uh, get in the media, it worked. Because I first heard about this not from the English language media, but from the Norwegian media. So if it works, I mean, if that attention also translates into donations, which I don't think so, at least not until the goal of 100,000 or 150. Uh, then I guess more power to them. But I don't understand why there's so many triggered or you know enraged by it. That's the part that I'm not understanding. I mean, it's the vagina beer. Of course, it's going to have a sexualized marketing campaign. Wouldn't you? I mean,
I mean, I wouldn't sell vagina beer, but if I were to sell vagina beer, it would be sexualized. Yes.
yeah. I mean, and it's not the only product that it's marketed better using a sexualized campaign. I mean, cars are being sold better when you have a sexualized marketing campaign because and that rings true even when selling to people who know what to ask about a car. If you put a very nice lady in the saloon as well, you're more likely to sell a particular kind of car, even
Yeah.
if the agent explains to the client all the technical details of the car and whatnot. That still goes the second after the sexualized marketing campaign. And I don't see the problem with it. I mean, we're all adults here. What's so wrong about this?
Yeah. I also don't quite understand what they're going on about this um, BDSM ale made using vaginal lactic acid bacteria of women with brown and red hair. What do women with brown and red hair have to do with BDSM? Or
Uh,
maybe they're talking about women in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. I don't know. Maybe those usually have brown or red hair.
Although that would be quite a bad idea from a marketing standpoint. Well, unless they avoid showing the pictures. I mean, have you seen the girls from the BDSM movement?
No, the,
The,
the BDS movement.
yeah, yeah.
Because the
Have,
M is a movement.
yeah, have you seen their faces? I mean, just Google on YouTube. Actually, the expression is correct. Google on YouTube. Search on YouTube. Um, yeah, search on YouTube BDS protest and just watch the first three clips. They're all pretty much similar. You'll see a lot of big red type of ladies at their protests. I mean, If I were to make Vagina beer, I wouldn't go there to pick up new recruits.
Yeah, probably not.
Or if I were to do that, then I would avoid showing the pictures. I would say, well, it's I don't know. I would take then the pictures of a I don't know, a very beautiful expat Iranian model or something like that. I'd say, well, we use this one.
Yeah, something like that.
Jesus Christ! I mean, come on. This one is so fucked up that, yeah, no. All right. Enough. I can't think of new things to say about vaginal beer. It's just too retarded. But the fact that the
Yeah.
media took the bait, that's the most important thing to emphasize. The media actually took the bait.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're just about out of time. We've managed to get through this, even though it's been quite long once again.
Yep. Yeah, well,
Yes.
technically, we still do have 4 minutes, but yeah, we managed to get them all through, even though this time was a bit longer. Although, to be honest, we did spend a lot more time than usual for almost every story.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could afford to renounce a little bit from that German efficiency. All right, then, with that being said, I have nothing further to add.
I have one further suggestion, which is to take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone. Mr. Huff, please take us out. Mr. Huff? Probably the slow ISP again.
What is going on? It says we're still live, but
Yep.
James has dropped from the call.
Yep. I've seen that too.
Should we
So,
just leave?
yep. I think we should just leave and well, tough luck. It's probably the ISP, slow ISP again.
So will there be a show next week?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Next week, yes, and then 22 and 29, no.
Okay.
Sorry about that, folks. I dropped out for a second. I'm back now.
Okay, can you please take us out?